Hey guys, today we're going to talk about what was going on in China during the medieval time period. That's the time period that we're studying right now. And as an introduction, let's just go through this video, 3,000 years of Chinese history in 1 minute. Starting in 1000 BCE with a civilization we didn't even talk about. The Warring State periods, there was a lot of different divisions in China. And then there we have the Qin Dynasty that we started to study, beginning of the classical time period, and of course the Han, which started to expand, in which we've studied the most important Chinese empire of the classical time period around 1000 BCE. And then remember, Han falls, it collapses, it breaks into 3 different kingdoms, and there's this division in China until along comes the next major dynasty, which is around 581, the Sui dynasty. And after the Sui, we have the Tang, which you can see extends far out along the trade routes here. And some more division and war, followed by the Song down here in the south. And just for fun, let's go past and see what the future holds. The Yuan, the Ming, the Qing, and finally, present day, the People's Republic of China. All right, so today we're going to start looking at, like I said, the medieval China time period. And during this time period, we have 3 main dynasties: the Sui, the Tang, and the Song. And if you want an easy way to remember them, you can think Sui, S means it's small, it didn't last very long. T, the Tang, was famous for their trade. And Song, just like a nice song, they were known for their culture, their art, their music. Let's start with the Sui. The Sui was very small, as you can see here. But it did succeed in bringing China back into one unified unit after many years of division. This was again around the years 561 to 618. That's only 50 years. They continued, they reinstituted the written exams for the selection of people to be involved in the bureaucracy, those civil service exams. And they constructed the Grand Canal, which is a pretty cool thing. It connected the capital with the southern region, which is the agricultural region, and that allowed food, specifically grain, to come up to the north. And if you look here, we can see the Grand Canal is right here, and you can see it goes all the way from the south all the way up here to the north. Pretty cool. And this is another image of the Grand Canal. It's still in use today. And it's actually been extended. You can see now it goes all the way up here, all the way up here, and all the way up here. So it's this massive canal. And even though a canal may not look as exciting as the Great Wall of China, you don't see many pictures of it. Imagine the engineering feat of digging a giant canal 1,000 years ago. Now the Sui, it only lasted for 2 reigns. That means it lasted for 2 emperors. There was unrest. Things like the Grand Canal cost money. You get money for the Grand Canal and also to rebuild the Great Wall of China by taxes. And taxes, people don't really like them. And so that leads to unrest. And eventually the Tang is going to take over. Now the Tang, as you can see here, is much larger. You see again the Grand Canal going to the capital city, and you also see how it extends out here. And just like the Han Dynasty, it's going to control that region. Why? Because of trade. Because trade goes along the Silk Road, and the more that they control, the more power they will have. Now the Tang not just controlled China itself, but they actually extended and militarily took over Korea in the north. They took over parts of Central Asia, which is we later think of as Mongolia, and they also controlled down here into Vietnam. Here we have some pictures of some of the emperors during the Tang. During this time, with trade comes a lot of movement of people. You have merchants, you have pilgrims, those are people traveling for religious reasons. You had missionaries, you had students, people moving all over the region. What's interesting is what happens with religion during this time. This is really the time that Buddhism becomes the most popular religion in China. Now, we've talked about Buddhism before, but remember, Buddhism started in India. And we talked about Confucianism being the main belief system in China. Now, during the medieval time period, Buddhism is going to spread and really, really become the main religion of the common people in the Tang and the medieval China time period. What's interesting is that the leaders of the Tang culture, of the Tang government, they really were not fans of Buddhists. They really preferred Confucianism. And therefore, they even persecuted some of the Buddhists. It was considered a foreign thing, etc., etc. And so Buddhism, China's unique because their official religion is going to be Confucianism and also NeoConfucianism. However, the most popular religion that the people actually practice will be Buddhism. We have a note here about how they use the horse in their art. The horse comes from Central Asia. It's used extensively in trade, of course. And let's talk about the Tang social system. Now, remember, taxes were a problem in the Sui Empire. Now, the Tang have a solution for that. They come up with a system called the equal field system, where they take land from the rich, the wealthy, and the nobles, and they give it to peasants. This is not the first time this has happened in China. In fact, that happened during the Han Empire, when they were trying to prevent social problems. The poor were upset, and so they took land from the rich and they distributed it to the poor. It didn't function. It didn't work in the Han. Well, they tried again in the Tang, and this was going to happen again. Guess what's going to happen in the 1900s? In the last, just 100 years ago, when the communists take over China, they'll do the same thing, taking the land from the wealthy and giving it to the peasants. Also, the Tang, yes, they're going to have taxes, but more importantly, they're going to continue even more the civil service exam system. Now, I want to make a special mention to the Tang Empress Wu, and write down her name. I'm not sure why it will not show me her and her name, but Empress Wu is significant to us. This is the first female emperor of a major empire, the first that we have studied, and her story is a very interesting one that I'm not going to get into the entire story, but I do want you to look it up. She started as a concubine of the emperor, and then she used all kinds of methods to gain power. She ended up as the empress, ruled China for 15 years, and she was an extremely effective ruler who brought about some very important social change. Now, Tang Economics. As we said before, Tang was all about trade. They continued luxury items, trading silks and things like that. They had all kinds of things that helped with agriculture. The most important is this one, high-yield champa rice from Vietnam. And this is what that means. They brought in a kind of rice from Vietnam that grew twice as fast as the rice that they had had previously. Now, typically when you're farming, you get one crop per year. So you plant your corn in the spring, you pick it in the fall, and then in the winter nothing happens, you plant it again in the spring. Well, the champa rice that comes from Vietnam grew so fast that you could plant in the beginning of the year and it would already be ready to be harvested halfway through the year, and so you could grow it again. And so this is a great example of an agricultural innovation or idea or product that comes to another country and radically changes the country. Because when you have more rice, you have more food. As we know from the earliest ancient civilizations, when you have more food, you have more people. The other thing that happened was people came up with paper money. And the Chinese invented the idea of paper money. Paper money is more efficient than coins. It's lighter, it's easier to take around with you. And anytime you make it easier for people to pay for things, it's going to make trade go faster. So in the old days, before they even invented money, it was very hard to trade because you were just trading oats or trading products. You tried to find somebody who wanted what you had. Then they invented coins. Coins made trade move a lot faster. Now the Chinese are the first ones to invent paper money. And this is going to make things go even faster. China is also famous for their ceramics. And here's some examples of Tang ceramics. Now, the fall of the Tang, like the fall of many empires, part of it, poor leadership. They ended up with a prince who became the emperor, who cared more about music and women than he did about being a good leader. There was corruption, there were problems in the government, and then you had a rebellion by a general who stole from the rich and gave to the poor, and the emperors gave power to the military leaders until they had no power left. All right, let's move on to the Song Dynasty. Now, the Song Dynasty was begun by a general. Yes, thank you for the applause. The Song Dynasty was started by a general who was also a scholar named Song Taizu. He was emphasizing education and art and also industry, which means work, over the military. And so during the Song, you had a time of great artistry in China. Here you see the size of the Song, smaller than the Tang. During the Song, there were some important movements. For example, here you have China reaching 100 million people, which at that time in world history was a lot of people. Here you have rice, the champa rice again, replaces wheat as the main crop of China. And as I mentioned before, 2 crops a year creates more food. And continuing to have trade flourishing, things like tea, cotton, porcelain, and silk, and of course the Grand Canal helped with that. Also, production of oil and steel increased as coke was used to power the forges. Coke is a rock, a product, not the Coca-Cola that you're thinking of. And of course, we mentioned paper money already. Song porcelain is an interesting product that we want to mention. We've talked, I know, a lot about silk, but porcelain is also a luxury product made in China that would have been traded far. Now, porcelain during the Song time period was lighter, it was thinner, It was very elegant. And this is the kind of thing that I know it looks like something you could buy at the dollar store for $1, but at this time, this was an extremely beautiful, elegant luxury item that would have been in high demand around the world. Now, during the time of the song, you also had some amazing inventions from China. Top of the list, gunpowder. Gunpowder, which of course is going to radically change the world, is invented in China during the medieval time period and eventually spreads around the world. The Song are also excellent astronomers, and they begin to print books. The first printed book using movable type, which were like giant stamps. Imagine stamps with letters, and you put them all together to make books. That was developed around the year 1000. And until the year 1750, there were more books written in Chinese than all languages combined. Later, the Europeans discover how to print books, and they will print books, but it happened first in China. And also naval technology. They are able to develop enormous ships and also rudders. So rudders are the little things that go on the back of the ship that help direct which direction it's going to go, help steer the ship. And perhaps as important as gunpowder is the final thing, the magnetic compass. And the compass, which helps a sailor know which way is north, which way is south, which way is east, which way is west, helps people get around, allows people to travel long distances by ships, is going to radically change the world. In fact, you have 3 things on this page that are going to radically change the world. One is gunpowder, used to make guns. Second is printing, which is going to be used to make education flourish and knowledge flourish. And third, the magnetic compass, which allows sailors to sail around. Since Song, the emperor, was very much into art, here's some Song art for you to appreciate. And we do want to mention tea. And this developed during the Tang Dynasty, and then later even more during the Song. And tea will end up becoming important and famous all around the world. A few things on the social system. Again, they're continuing with the civil service exams. Very important. Now, we talked about Confucianism before. Here we have NeoConfucianism. And this is, neo means new. It's a new version of Confucianism. And it is going to become the official religion of Chinese dynasties. With NeoConfucianism, people care less about merchants. Merchants become a bit less important. People focus on education, on caring about the group, etc., etc. Now, during this time period, a very unusual and very disturbing tradition developed in ancient China, and it's called footbinding. Now, women at this time were not very valued. They were married off to men when they were very young, and families were looking for their to try to marry their daughters off to rich and successful men. And during this time period, the Tang and the Song, it became considered a status symbol. It became considered beautiful for a woman to have small feet. And so what parents would do is when their child was very young, just a girl, they would wrap the feet in cloth, They would crack the toes, bend them underneath the foot, and wrap it and keep it kept like that, as you can see in this graph, for 2 to 3 years, until eventually the shape of the foot actually changes, the bone structure actually changes, until the woman is has an extremely small foot and has to use this extremely small shoe. It's extremely painful. It's very dangerous. Some women end up not being able to walk, but for some reason this was the cultural expectation. It's extremely interesting. It's extremely sad what happened. I encourage you to do some Google research, look for some pictures, and you can see pictures of women who actually have bound feet, even to this day. So finally, the Song Empire ends, and this is the last of the medieval Chinese civilizations that we're going to talk about. Outside invaders come in and weaken the empire. The most important of them is the Mongols. Finally, I've got some short answer questions for you. Identify and explain one way that empires in medieval China promoted trade. I've got a quote for you. In the medieval era, just like today, the most important things in the world are made in China. Identify and explain 2 technological innovations that could be used to support the above quote. And then question C, describe the roles of women in medieval China. Again, I'm looking for about 3 sentences for each of these, A, B, and C. 3 high-quality sentences. That's all for today.